Welcome to the Dr. Coffee Podcast. Dr. Juandré Klopper, good to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Simon. It was such an honor to finally meet you, even if it's virtually.
Awesome. So, Juandré, with all of our guests, we like to get a sense of your junior doctor years and where you did your medical training. So, for our viewers, please tell us where you did your medical school, and then talk to us about internship and ComServe, and we might dive into your experiences there a bit.
Sure thing. So, I did my undergraduate at Stellenbosch, graduated 2020, around the COVID time, of course, and then I was fortunate to get my internship close to my fiance at the time. So I did my internship at Tygerberg Hospital, and then I got married and did my ComServe in Paarl at the rural clinics there, the Drakenstein sub-district. And ComServe ended about 2 weeks ago at end of December.
Alrighty. First of all, with ComServe, so you mentioned that you were married at the time. Did they take into consideration your marriage when they placed you in the Western Cape?
So it was kind of an act of grace that I got Western Cape, because at that point in time, like allocations were done before we got married. We got married right around the end of December. So it was pretty much, it was pretty much a miracle. I got Paul close to my wife.
And his wife a doctor as well?
She's an intern now.
And do you find that having somebody married to you in medicine, is it a blessing? Is it a curse? Maybe a bit of both?
It's definitely a blessing. It's definitely a blessing. It's fantastic to have someone that can support you and can kind of relate to the kind of days you're having. And it's also quite nice for me now that I'm reflecting back on my internship journey. It's almost like reliving through some of the things with her. So when she's on psychiatry, I kind of think back of my fond memories of being on psychiatry, etc., etc.
Right. Now, you mentioned that you are recently completed ComServe 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
What's your station in life now? What are you doing? Are you employed? What's keeping you busy through the day?
Interesting question. So as you know, there's a bit of a problem at the moment with funding of healthcare posts. A little bit. 8.7 billion rand approximately, if you like to trust the Daily Maverick articles. So I'm in the same position that many other junior doctors find themselves in. I'm not formally employed at the moment. Sorting out some things with maybe doing some locums here and there, but some people have offered to me that I can maybe call myself self-employed, even though I haven't made a cent out of any of my businesses. So except the one batch of coffee I sold once when I tried to do a home roastery. But my businesses are very much altruistic at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Look, this is in no way to pull you down or discourage you, and hopefully that you've had 2 weeks to be refreshed and reflect, like you said, on internship and ComServe. The purpose of our discussion today actually is to talk about all those side business, all of those side projects. I first got to engage with you a little bit on LinkedIn, I believe, where I got to see some of the projects that you've been doing during ComServe and obviously a little bit before that. So we'll talk about what those are. And for the benefits of our listeners and our audience, it's all about the side projects that you've had, which have mostly been in the app development space. And the purpose of the conversation for me that I want to get out of it, and then hopefully that our listeners draw out of it, is the value of having these side projects, that even as you are chasing your studies or chasing your qualifications or in your junior doctor years, to have a broad enough perspective and a broad enough mindset that you don't overlook opportunities to make a difference. So let's begin.
100%.
Let's begin with the embryonic period of all of your app developments, and tell us what it was that led to you developing some technological advances and apps for people to use in their phones.
Sure thing, Simon. So how it started started, not to go back too far in history, but my father is a software developer. It did not, let me put it this way. I never had a big interest in computers. I'm not a big fan of computer games, really. The only thing I really used my computer for up until last year was watching series now and then. And then what started happening was I was working in primary medicine, and I started getting very frustrated. And I think that's something that a lot of other doctors can relate to in South Africa. There's a lot of inefficiencies. There are a lot of mistakes that are being made, and it's not that like we are always supposed to be perfect and not make mistakes. But some of the mistakes I've made and I've seen other people made, it's simple calculation mistakes. It's small things like that. But in the heat of the moment, when you're trying to intubate the patient or you are trying to cardiovert, flutter, or whatever, it's difficult to always keep your wits about you. So the story began with me sitting one day and thinking about all the things that are frustrating me. And I started asking myself, what can solve these problems? And one thing came to mind. I see everyone in the clinic have smartphones, all the people working there. And I was like, okay, cool, but I don't know how to code. I don't know how to code for smartphones. And then I was like, okay, but they're also computers. I was like, I also don't know how to code on computers. So luckily, a good friend is Google. So when I went home, I started looking up courses on Python programming, got into Python programming, wrote a few programs that I used on the personal computers at the clinics, or I was hoping to use on personal computers. I only realized too late that there's firewalls, so I can't do that. And then I was like, okay, cool. That was a fun experiment, ended badly, can't use my programs. And then I realized, okay, but let's pivot. Let's think, what can I use? I can use the smartphone. So then I taught myself a little bit how to code for smartphones. And yeah, so that's pretty much the long story for saying how I got to do the coding part. So I started building small, simple apps. And I always tell people, if you gave a grade 8 IT student one of my apps as homework, he'll probably finish coding it in 10 minutes. It's not difficult. I'm not a programmer. But the thing is, unfortunately, we've got brilliant minds in IT and software development, but if they are not in the recess seeing what mistakes are being made, they're not going to know what to fix. They're not going to know how to, or they'll know how to code, but they don't know what to code necessarily. So that's pretty much where I come in, and that is pretty much what I sell at Cape MedTech. It's pretty much my perspective, more than my expertise as a coder. Although I have developed 7 mobile apps now, specifically addressed at solving certain problems I've seen in clinics and so forth. It's more the perspective of young healthcare workers, and that's kind of what I also want to encourage people to remember, is that if you see a problem, if you see something frustrating you, no one else is going to fix it, like if you're not going to fix it. And sitting around hoping for someone else to learn coding or do the stuff, it's not going to happen. It's on us.
Yeah, there's some great encouragement there to draw out. I think, first of all, like you said, Google can teach you a lot of things. And even in our med school training, we're doing a lot of learning via YouTube or via online resources. And to apply that to other areas of our life, if you need to learn finances, if you need to learn coding or anything like that, to look to the internet as basically your huge online library. If you can read, you can learn. And I think it's just great that you took that need, because too many people are complaining about the need. Anyone can point out a problem. Anyone can say where things are broken, and anyone can break things further. But it takes real determination. It takes real hard work to make things better or to make a solution. So the solutions that you've provided, I mean, you mentioned that it's Cape Med Tech is your small startup that you've put together, and you said that there's 7 apps. I didn't even know that there's 7. So let's talk about the 7, because I know about the Triage Buddy, I know about the IV Calc, I know about AppGar. Tell us about these apps. Maybe for each, tell us what the need was, tell us what the app is and what it does, because at the end of this episode, hopefully our audience is going to go download these from the App Store or from the Android Play Store. You did mention that it's not necessarily a perfected work. So I'm sure that you'd welcome feedback and you'd welcome input from these young healthcare professionals of bright minds, maybe even somebody who's got a little bit more talent in coding to say, hey, I've got a great idea to bump up your UI, and this is in no way what you've done. I think it's fantastic what you've done. That's why you're on the podcast. So tell us about the different apps, about the problems they solve and how you put that together.
Yeah, no, 100%. I definitely encourage feedback. It's the most important part of what we're doing. Is the entire point of Cape MedTech is to help healthcare workers help others. And that's actually our slogan as well, helping others help others. So if we're not helping you the way you want to be helped, tell us. So yes, so to answer your question, I'm going to have to go sequentially through the 7 apps. So the first one,
one by one.
Yeah, so the first one I developed, it's very simple. It was the INR protocol for the place I was working at. It's just for myself, and that's pretty much where I just tested the waters with app development. So what I did was we had a long page protocol tables of telling us what to do with certain INRs and stuff like that. And the idea was to develop an app that streamlines the consultation process, that you literally just type in the INR, you say the patient took the medicine, it's whatever, patient bleeding, what are the target INRs, and it gives you responsive feedback on that. So that's something that I only use myself. But I developed it for a larger audience. Unfortunately, a lot of people were kind of happy with just going on the way they were doing things. But I did find that I managed to work much faster when I was using the app anecdotally, off the record.
Sample size N1.
Sample size 1, exactly. Yes. So then what happened was I was working one day on the emergency side, and there was a baby coming in who was quite ill. We had to give the child some medicine. I was on the phone with pediatrics, asked the person helping me to draw up medication at a certain dose, a certain concentration, and they were unable to calculate it, which is a bit frustrating for me, because I was kind of thinking like, okay, cool. It's I understand it is tight, but I'm busy with something this side. I'm trying to convince pediatricians to take this child. I'm trying to wangle things. I can't really do all the thinking and all the thinking. But anyway, but I ended up obviously helping them and then stepping back. And then I realized, okay, cool. I realized there's a need for the 3 very common calculations that are being made with regards to drawing up medicine, especially in a resuscitation situation where you don't have time necessarily to say, cool, this patient's in torsade, we have to give magnesium sulfate. I can tell you from the protocol the dose to give in milligrams, but then you have to go find the ampule, you have to look at the concentration on the ampule, and then you have to kind of calculate how much volume to draw up to give. And I'm using MagSolve as an example because we had a case like that where I can't even remember what the concentration on the ampule was that day, but I do remember people struggling to calculate how much to give, and we were literally doing chest compressions, so we couldn't stop what we were doing to do the math. So that's kind of the basis of that, is to see, okay, what are common calculations? It's not hectic algorithms, but when things get stressful, it's difficult to think like math,
Yeah.
I'm not by any means the smartest guy in any room. So I'm the first one to admit I struggle with math. That's why I like quick fixes, like writing an app to help me with that. Anyway, so that's the one thing. Then another thing I realized was IV Calc.
What's the name of
Sorry, that's ER Calc. ER Calc.
And it's still available as well.
It is available. Then I developed IV Calc. That was more based on my experience in the tertiary hospital where I did my internship, where oftentimes you'd have a patient, you discuss with nephrology. Nephrology would be like, give 1 liter fluids over 8 hours. And then you're sitting there in the ward, I mean, even in a tertiary hospital, you don't have IV infusion pumps everywhere. You're still using 20 dropper, 60 dropper giving sets. So IV calc was kind of an answer to something that I struggled with as an intern, is calculating your infusion rates to say, cool, I want to give this amount of fluid over 8 hours. How many seconds between drops do I give? So something simple like that, it just makes it simpler. Like, you can calculate it with a piece of paper and a pen, but if you don't have to, you can do it within 2 seconds on the app. So it's nice. So that's
100%.
IV calc.
And one other thing is, I think, as you were alluding to earlier, there's so many deficits in healthcare budgets. And if you think the number of patients in a tertiary hospital maybe that are getting dialer flows so that you can make sure they're getting it at 100 mils per hour, or 125 mils per hour in the case that you were speaking about earlier, each of those dialer flows might only cost 10 Rand. But multiply it over the number of patients every single day over a number of years that are having a dialer flow, possibly needlessly, if their doctors and nurses just have this app IV Calc, that somebody can take 10 seconds to count how many drops there are in 10 seconds, multiply it out to be a minute, or use the app, as you're saying, so that they don't need that dialer flow. The amount that you can save. That's just one example in one area, one problem that you've solved.
Well, that's the thing. It's again, it's just real world problems, and if I was smart enough to calculate it out of my mind, I probably wouldn't have needed to develop the app. So luckily, I'm not that smart, so that's great. I can really put myself into. But that's the thing, and that's if I can interrupt the discussion on the apps just briefly, just to say that is pretty much the entire point of Cape Medtech, is to see where can we save time and resources, because our patient population is not going to decrease anytime soon. Our budget for treating patients is not increasing at the rate that our patients are increasing. So at the end of the day, that VQ mismatch, if I may put it like that, that mismatch in resources to who needs the resources, the only way we're going to solve that is to be more efficient with what we have, and with the time we have and the resources we have. And it's a long shot, but it's the only shot we have at this moment, really, I think.
Very good.
So yeah, so that's IV Calc. Then after IV Calc, had a resus, right? So had quite a rough resus the one day, and as you know, when you are a ComServe, you are managing resuses, and you're standing there, you're doing your compressions, and again, there was one of the cases where I think I had to intubate, and one of the other MO was doing compressions, and then we had to ask one of our I think it was one of our nursing students to do the timekeeping, but it's a stressful environment. It's quite stressful. If it's your first day, I think, shame, it was a first day actually. It's quite rough to be given a stopwatch and be like, I want you to tell us in 2 minutes when it's time for a pulse check. We gave adrenaline. In 4 minutes from then, tell us when to give adrenaline again. And just keep an eye on the rate, that we're not going too fast. And also keep an eye on the clock. And just, can you write down everything we're doing? It's quite tough. So, and another thing, I don't know if you have a background in music at all, but
we'll keep that quiet.
So I dabbled in singer songwriting and playing every now and then. Didn't get very far, because the moment I got nervous, I started speeding up. And that's something musicians do oftentimes when they get nervous. And that's something everyone does when they're doing chest compressions. Unfortunately, if you are doing CPR and you're going too fast because you're nervous, you're not giving the heart time to fill with blood. You're not pumping anything. So CPR app, as I took my experience with that bad resus, looked at everything, put it together, and I said, I need an audio-visual metronome that guides the resus team to give chest compressions at the right rate. So I added that. Then I thought, okay, cool. There are metronome apps. What else do I need to differentiate this? Okay, timers. So CPR app has preset audible alerts that the moment you start compressions, you press it, and in 2 minutes, it will tell you it's time for a pulse check. Another thing is you give adrenaline in 3 to 5 minute cycles. So I set it in the middle at 4 minutes. So if you've given adrenaline, you can start the clock, and in 4 minutes, it will tell you when it's time to give another dose of adrenaline. So you don't need to watch the clock the whole time, because there are bigger fish to fry.
Yeah.
Then I've added some counting widgets that you can keep track of how many cycles you've done, because it's always a nightmare at the end of a recess. Everyone's standing there looking at each other. How long was this recess? How many cycles did we give? How much adrenaline did we give? Can we see the amps? How many amps are lying around? People really struggle with that aspect, and it's important medico-legally. And then also another thing, H's and T's. I mean, I've added a small checklist where you can just check all the H's and T's you've considered, and then a timer at the bottom so you can see the total duration of your recess. So it's all about looking at what are the real world things we're facing that we're struggling with, and what can we do to pragmatically, attempt to solve some of it. Especially where we have small teams. I don't know, you've probably done your ACLS or something like that recently, and they advocate for, I remember when I did NELS, it's like the neonatologist is going to come and intubate. I was like, okay, yes, but I'm working in what's the place? Sauron Clinic now. There isn't a neonatologist who's going to come and intubate. So we've got amazing guidelines and things, but we work in a bit of a different context.
100%. Your ideal rescue team is like 5 people or even more, so that you can switch out CPR. People doing compressions. You've got one person who's your compression coach and doing your timing, etc. And you think, okay, but even if you have 5 people, are they well trained and skilled enough that they can do all of those different things? Are they all on the same page?
Exactly.
What the app does is at least everyone is united in one cause and brings everyone together. What was the name of that app, Juandré?
So very creative. It's CPR app. Didn't put much thought into that.
Awesome.
Yeah. So then I'm going to try and keep it interesting. CPR app was that one. Then, what I really hated as an intern was looking at phototherapy graphs. That little 2 pages, the phototherapy and exchange therapy graphs that we all know.
Yes.
I hated that, because I would always be like, I take like one pen on the x-axis and one pen on the y-axis and see, where does it intersect exactly? Because you want to be perfect. And it's this little A5 page, and now you're trying to look, or you have a little rulers or something. Anyway,
sometimes you mistake the phototherapy line for the exchange line, or vice versa.
Yeah. And I mean, it's quite serious. I mean, neonatal jaundice is one of the scariest things I've had to manage. I think, I'm not a neonatologist. For me, it's very scary. So basically what I did was, and another thing was, when I was an intern, when I was in the wards looking at all the kiddies on the graphs, I was always like, how old is this child? I write down, child was born 7:30 yesterday. It is now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 16 hours later. And I mean, it's easy to do. It's not difficult, but it's a bit of a waste of time. So again, the app basically has a small calculator. You scroll till you get the child's date of birth, the time of birth, gives you the age in hours, and then you've got the y-axis and x-axis lines on the graph so that you can move to accurately see exactly where you want to be. So it's simple app. Really, anyone can build it. But again, just thinking out of experience, what is it that frustrates you? What is it that's wasting time, even if it's 1 or 2 seconds?
I think an important thing is that the world's most groundbreaking discoveries or solutions are sometimes the most mundane, everyday things. And right now I'm thinking about something like a toilet, right?
Yeah.
Toilets have probably saved more lives than anything in history, just because our sewerage is now going somewhere away from us, away from our water source, away from our food source. It's not piling up somewhere. And a little simple invention or innovation like that, the functioning of a toilet is not something very complex, but it has made a massive difference. So it's similar with these apps. They don't have to be an 18-month development project. You don't need a soundtrack.
Yes.
You need to get licensing rights to use animations and things. but you're making a difference. I think that's what's so important, is that those solutions to what people really need on the ground, providing those solutions, and also recognizing the problems. You obviously are one of those people that goes home frustrated with the inefficiencies, goes home frustrated with the problems that you're encountering, and saying, okay, it's not enough that I identify the problem. What's the solution?
This episode of the Dr. Coffee podcast is proudly sponsored by Money and Medicine. Money and Medicine is a platform with over 10 years experience dedicated to educating and empowering medical professionals to make informed and calculated financial decisions. To learn more about Money and Medicine, go to our website at www.moneyandmedicine.co.za.
We are back with Dr. Juandré Klopper, and we're talking about his numerous apps. So I think so far we've covered, is it 3 or 4? We've spoken about the IV Calc, we've spoken about CPR app, we've spoken about ER Calc. Remind me what the other one was? The INR app.
CPR. Yes.
Right. So tell us, I think we've got 3 more to go, and we're going to talk about Sponsor Medic and Cape MedTech and all the other things you're involved in. So what other apps have you got for us that we can install from the Play Store or the App Store?
Yes. So just a short disclaimer quickly before I get into that. I have to mention at this point that we're still not on the Apple Store just yet.
Okay.
We're on the Android Store at the moment.
I operate from the world of Samsung, so I have absolutely no qualms with that. I'm sad for my iPhone-loving colleagues who, need to the 21st century.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how many messages I get in a week. People asking me when are we doing Apple. I am working on it. It's just it's taking a bit of.
No, look, the reality is that Apple is, as I understand it, Apple certainly has got a large segment of the healthcare worker market, but
definitely
Apple is interesting to code for. And what people don't necessarily appreciate is that Apple vetoes all of the apps that go onto the App Store, but also they have to be standardized for iOS. Whereas with Android, Android's a little bit more flexible, and you can get away a little bit with display dimensions. The Android kind of accommodates that, whereas Apple doesn't.
Yes, and the beauty of the platform I use, it's a cross. The words are eluding me. Yes, let's say cross-platform. Yes, it's cross-platform. So I mean, the apps, they should be working on Apple. It's just that getting it on the store is a bit of a headache at the moment. But anyway, if you do have an Android, if you are one of those lucky people, you can download Triage Buddy. Triage Buddy is something I also developed after a professional encounter that was a bit upsetting. I was working in the clinic one day. A patient came in. He was sitting there, wasn't looking great. And anyway, but his file was in the stack, and our clinic stacks look, you work through it, and your patients sometimes wait for a few hours while you're waiting their turn to be seen. And this poor gentleman sat with a heart rate of about 160. The vitals were recorded. It was written down, but unfortunately, there was very junior staff, and they didn't really appreciate that it is an emergency. So the guy ended up having flutter, ended up going secondary, then tertiary hospital. But the thing is, I realized. I've worked in quite a few emergency rooms where we had Hectors, which is awesome. I don't know if you know Hectors where you work. So you're in the Western Cape. I'm not sure exactly the name of the guy that's developing it, but it's flippin' cool software that they've developed. But it's on personal computers in emergency rooms. So the triage staff can type in, the vitals, and they get kicked out a Hector score on the twos, and then it goes to a doctor. Doctor just signs off if it is a green, a yellow, an orange, or whatever. And then, so that's very useful.
Is that the same unfortunately, that also gives you a one-liner history? So, because I've seen some interns post pictures where they're like, "Oh gosh, this is my casualty call," and it'll say I had a patient coming in for shortness of breath or something insane, like at 2 a.m. Patient says he stubbed his toe due to load shedding.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a patient once come in at 4 o'clock when I was on call for gynecology to have her IUD removed. So it was around 4 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. It was very
Bizarre.
very early in the morning. Anyway, it's one way to skip the queues. It's a life hack. The clinic queues. No, so what we have at some of the emergency centers is hectors, which is awesome. Unfortunately, in clinics, we don't have hectors. I mean, I'm sure there are clinics that have it, but a lot of the clinics don't have it. And another thing is our triage staff, for example, at the small clinics we work at, apart from the fact that we have load shedding, we had a lot of load shedding this year, and the clinics don't always have generators. And the other thing is they don't really have PCs. They don't have personal computers where they do the vitals and stuff. So I thought to myself, cool, there's a need, there's something we can develop. So basically went and used the South African Triage Society guidelines and put it in the app format. Obviously, I'm not charging for the app to be used because it is under like the Creative Commons license, if I remember correctly. I did look into the legality of it, don't worry. But the point is basically taking the information, processing it in a way that makes it usable for nurses, the people that are doing the triaging to see, cool, there's a patient with a heart rate of 150. It's going to take me a second to feed that into the app, and it will tell me automatically, listen, this needs to be checked out. The sky is an orange, or the sky is a yellow, or the sky is a red, or whatever. So that is pretty much where Triage Buddy comes in. It's important to be able to triage no matter where you work. Because I mean, yeah. So that's Triage Buddy. And then another one I developed was actually for my wife when she was working in pediatrics. So she was doing, that classic C-section. You're waiting outside the theater. They're cutting the Caesar. You're there with the incubator. You're going to resusc this child now when you're on pediatrics. And I kind of blocked that memory out of my internship, thanks to no small part to my psychologist helping me process the trauma of doing neonatal resusces at Tygerberg. So it's been, I've made my peace with some of that experiences. But anyway, when my wife was doing it, I could appreciate the stress of that. And one of the things that I remember was, you start the timer when the child is born, right? I don't know.
On the warmer, yeah.
Probably not all the incubators. Yeah, on the warmer. But the thing is, then if you've got a sick baby, and even worse, if you've got sick twins, it's really difficult to remember to do your APGAR checks because you are trying to get the oxygen tank to work, or you are trying to get a good seal on the CPAP, or who knows what's happening. It can be any of those things. And my wife jokingly said she said she wants an APGAR app. And I jokingly said, an app for your APGAR. So we built APGAR.
APPGAR. I love that.
Yeah, it's not funny anymore. Because I've mansplained it too much now. But anyway, so it's APGAR, and the idea is it's preset timers. Again, 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 50 minutes. You press one button.
Brilliant.
At the time the child is born. You don't need to worry about, now I have to set it for 5 minutes, or after 10 minutes, or whatever. It's there. And the other thing is it has built in the APGAR calculators. So it's great for training. It's great for education. If you're teaching students how to do APGAR checks, if you're teaching students to do CPR, for example, you can use CPR app. It's great educational tools as well, I think. That is primarily that is what it is. It's to help people do the things better.
I think that's so important. People see that there's opportunities outside of just having it ready for an emergency situation, but it's to prepare others for that emergency situation. Yes. Otherwise, what you're doing is you're training them from a piece of paper, and then it doesn't actually gel with real world situations. And like you mentioned, you've blocked out a certain amount of trauma, but this app makes it not traumatic because now you're not panicking about your 1, 5, 10 minutes. It automatically comes up for you, and it's literally You're pushing a button and making a little slider that's then going to calculate that APGAR and document it for you.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's small things. It's small things. And I mean, if you're looking at user experience, I mean, people that are, what's the industry I'm thinking? Recently read about this industry. I think it's like people, I think it's the car industry. But I mean, like, they'll spend large amounts of money to just improve your comfort with like this little bit. I mean, you can increase your comfort doing your work like with this much, with very incremental changes. So and free changes for that.
Very
matter.
good,
So,
Juandré.
so yeah.
Amazing.
That's pretty
Thank you for taking us through the journey with each app, because what I wanted to highlight was not just the app itself, but the need that you saw. Because I think sometimes when we're a junior doctor, we feel like we're in isolation, but there's a lot that's shared experience. There's a lot that we have in common. Whenever doctors get together, we always swap war stories. And, we complain about the system that we're in, but how many of us actually take the time to think, well, let's find a solution for it? And I love that you touched on the training aspect as well, because a number of our audience are medical students, and I want them to also be equipped ahead of time. I don't want them to have to, like you and I have a negative experience and then go home and say, gosh, that sucked. I need to read around that case, or I need to be more prepared so that when it happens again, I don't have that challenge, or I feel better prepared, or I know the solution to my problem. That's a patient's livelihood. It's a patient's life. It's a patient's well-being. It's a risk of complications, morbidity, and mortality, as we've touched on. So I think it's fantastic the way that the conversation has gone so far. You've done an admirable job. I think you've been far too humble. So I want to steer you towards Sponsor Medic and Cape MedTech as well. Tell us about what Sponsor Medic is, and give you an opportunity, because there might be somebody who potentially is going to be a big backer for you listening to this episode.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So Sponsor Medic. I was just thinking earlier about the episode that you recorded, where you were interviewing Aleph Muhlenberg. Sorry.
Yes.
The Dutch names always slip out of my mind, but I mean, my surname is Klopper, so I don't really have an excuse for.
He was episode 49, I believe.
Yeah, good memory on you. So I mean, and the approach that they've taken with and I like the name of the episode you had was it was like private and public relationship. That was pretty much, if I remember correctly. And I love that.
Overcoming and tackling inequality in South Africa, because we have the most unequal society in the world. We have a Gini index, I think the score is about 63, with, as we touched on in the episode, just to build a base for what you're going to lead into here. If everyone is equal in society, and everyone has equal opportunity, equal resources, that would be a Gini index score of 1. And if everything was unequally distributed, with just one person having everything and everyone else having 0, that would be a Gini index score of 100. South Africa is at 63, which is almost 2/3 of the way towards just one person having everything and the rest of the 63 million people in the country having nothing, which is crazy. And just some way to show how unequal South Africa is.
And I mean, inequality, if you're looking at if we look at the Gini coefficient, if we're talking about inequality, the moment you start talking about inequality in the health setting, that means very, very high stakes of that inequality. It's not just one person having an iPhone and the other person having a Xiaomi or having a Nokia. It's one person having access to life-saving treatment, the other person not. And that is, I mean, that is the most basic of human rights that you can ask for. So Sponsor Medic started, like most Afrikaans people's great stories, around the braaivleisvuur. So I was standing there one day. This was after I've started with Cape MedTech and the company was registered and everything. And I realized, not all our problems are going to be fixed with tech. It's unfortunately like that. Our problems are not going to be fixed by tech or politics or anything like that. Our problems are going to have to be fixed in new ways of thinking. I really hate saying this quote, because I always wonder if he really said this, but I think it was Einstein. He said that you can't fix problems with the same thinking that created the problem. I think it was him. I'm not sure, but anyway.
It was
The thing
certainly
is,
some source of Einstein that said it.
someone said it, and it's good. It's a good quote. It's a good quote.
Yeah.
I was standing around the Braaivleisvuur, and my father-in-law was actually asking me, like, his company, they do like architecture, street planning, town planning kind of work. And he was talking about how every month they donate a certain bit of their budget to a worthwhile cause, and every month they decide what cause to donate to. And I was thinking to myself, okay, this is one business. And they're donating about this many £1,000 to a charity every month. There are a lot of businesses doing that. And then we're not even talking about the big businesses. Like I won't quote the names and the numbers, but I've been talking the past few months with some very high-level CEOs, and the amount of money they're spending on corporate social investment, it's in the hundreds of millions of rand a year. So it's amazing what they are doing. So to backtrack, I was standing there, I was thinking to myself, man, I wish my clinic could have some of that money, because we are short-staffed and we need doctors. We can't afford to hire locums. And the simple example we use is to say, cool, if we have 10 doctors each seeing 25 patients, and one doctor takes annual leave, which is their right, that leaves 9 doctors. The amount of patients don't get less. So that means everyone else is doing 10% more work. Now, let's say one of them calls in sick, which unfortunately happens often, and again, not their fault, and again, their right to take a sick day. Now it's 8 doctors. The amount of patients did not decrease. Now everyone is doing 25% more work. So that's 25% more work. It's notable. And the thing is, usually what has been happening, and this is how the ecosystem reaches a bit of an equilibrium, is clinics have money to hire a locum. Locum comes in. It is a doctor working as an independent contractor, coming to the facility, seeing the patients, and prescribing medicine, using the resources of that facility. But they are a doctor coming in. They are just filling the shoes of the doctor that is not there. And I mean, it's invaluable. I've worked at facilities where we had the privilege of having locums, and it is really amazing if you know a locum is coming in today, because it really helps you with your workload. Anyway, back to the first thing I said. We're sitting with an 8.7 billion rand wage shortage at the moment. That is significant. I know a lot of posts are frozen. And I know a lot of clinics cannot afford locums anymore. So the thought came to us, let us rethink the way that the relationship between private and public in this sense. Because if we were to ask companies to give the Department of Health money to hire doctors, that's extra tax. No one wants to pay that. It's extra tax. But what will companies possibly do? They give money through corporate social investment for various reasons. They get tax benefits. There's a lot of different reasons, but I mean, austerity is the main one. And like I said, this austerity goes up into the hundreds of millions of rands per year for some of these companies. And that's not even the company I'm referring to is not even one of the top 10 biggest donors every year. So it's a lot of money going from private bank accounts into charity in South Africa. The idea is to channel that charity to medicine. So we are structuring a locum agency, but we're registering it as a public benefit organization at the Department of Social Development. And we are registering it as a non-profit company. So we've got 3 directors. All 3 of us are in Cape Town. 2 of us have medical backgrounds. Other one's just a very smart cookie. So the 3 of us, we've thought to ourselves, we need to rethink the way we're doing this, because there needs to be a new relationship between private and government here. And like they're already donating money. So we can be the middleman. We can give the tax certificate. We can give the marketing opportunities. We can do all these things for the private companies. They donate to us. We pay the locum salary. And then the clinics can apply to us and say, cool, we are desperately short-staffed. We've got 2 people off sick with COVID or whatever. We need help. And we can be like, cool, we're triaging our requests. We see these facilities need locums. This is how much funding we have. This is how many locums we can send out. We're going to send locums out. We are paying for them. They're working as volunteers in the government, in the clinics. But in that way, we are kind of thinking lean in the sense that we are not building our own clinics. We're not spending money on buying property. We're not spending money on brick and mortar assets and things like that. We are looking what is the need. So it's almost like the Uber model. It's just we're looking at what is necessary. There are medicine, there are resources, the stuff is there, the building is there. They need a doctor. So let's send a doctor and we'll pay for that doctor. So that's pretty much sponsor medic.
Yeah.
And it's far reaching the aspirations we have. We are hoping to by next year, hopefully we want to send out physiotherapists, psychologists. We want to really reach out to all the provinces, and we want to be able to offer all the members of the disciplinary team, the multidisciplinary team. But it's ambitious and it's a long journey, and we're having some trouble with the SARS registration. We need to get 18A certificates and there's a bit of a backlog. But we've got a meeting coming up with Netcare, for example, at the end of January. We had some good discussions with NASPERS. PPS sounds keen to help us. So we're ramping up interest in the corporate world, but it's slow. It's a slow kruip. It's a kruip. It's a slow crawl to where we want to be, and I have a little bit of an akathisia surrounding that. I've got this angst. I want to start. Yeah, it's like I know what it's like in the clinics. I know what it looks like when you're the only doctor in a township clinic and things are rough and your patients are waiting long to be seen and they get sicker the longer they wait. You don't want the diabetic old lady to sit next to someone who's got active TB for 3 hours, being exposed to TB. I mean,
that's very good,
it's
Juandré.
not just about,
I understand where you're going, and if there's any encouragement that I can offer at this point is just to keep on trucking. It must be extremely frustrating, especially coming from a coding background where any time constraints were simply, your own physiological need for sleep. You can code something in as long as it takes. Just sit down and do the task. And there's so many things in this process that, like you say, require approval, that you're waiting for paperwork, you're waiting for a backlog to clear, things that are outside of your control. But if I can take 2 seconds just to encourage you to keep on that path. And if there's anyone who's listening that knows of a way to not to circumvent anything, not to do anything underhanded or under the table, but to streamline that process for you, to make sure that the right timing, right things get done at the right place, and to make sure that that this process gets completed. I think, please, if anyone can, just to reach out to you. Definitely, we'll put in the show notes for this episode how to contact you and how to get involved.
This episode of the Dr. Coffee podcast is proudly sponsored by Money and Medicine. Money and Medicine is a financial platform specifically for medical doctors like yourself. So if you are in practice, in government, looking to find out more if you are adequately covered, if you are on track for retirement, how can you save on taxes? Do you have medical malpractice? Go check us out on www.moneyandmedicine.co.za. Check us out on social media, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and let us help you plan the plan.
Juandré, we're coming into land, and I think you've done a great job speaking to some of the challenges that you've faced along this journey. But I want you to reflect back now and think about some of the lessons that you've learned. You have obviously alluded to a number of them, and I think that there's a lot that all of us can take from the conversation so far. But what kind of lasting legacy or lessons have you learned that you can pass on to our audience of primarily junior doctors such as ourselves and med students who are going to follow on after us?
Yes. So I think there are a few things that come to mind. I think the one thing that I found very valuable is I was studying a while ago for my psychiatry primaries, which I ended up not writing because I kind of lost interest in psychiatry as a field, but or as a career. But one of the things that stayed with me was in the textbook on psychology, they were talking about what is important to people in different life stages. And when you look at your older people, as people approach death, legacy becomes quite important. Legacy becomes very important. And I want to encourage people. Well, I mean, we're doctors, we're medical students. We know people die. We see it every day. But not to be too morbid, and I don't finish on this point. It's a bit of a morbid point to finish on, so I will go into something more cheery. But the point is, look at the time you have on Earth, all right? Look at what you value. What are the things that are frustrating you? What are the things that irritate you? What are the things that you wish were better? Because you are the one that can fix it. And if you don't know how to, that's fine. Just go learn how to do it. Yeah. Because I mean, no one walks into med school day one, leave day two, know everything. You learn the stuff, and so that's the thing. It's not about necessarily your legacy that's important, but my point is you have a set amount of time in which to do the things you want to do, and no one knows how long their time is. But in that time, try and do what you can, because you owe it to yourself, actually. You owe it to yourself to do what you want to do, what the value that you want to add. And, I've met a lot of people say a lot of different things about how important money is to them and all that kind of stuff. And yes, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's great to drive a Mercedes. We don't know. But I'm 100% sure that if I'm lying on my deathbed one day, I wouldn't be thinking about the Mercedes driving experience. I don't think that's something I'd care much about. I think that's when you start realizing, cool, I had this opportunity to do this. What did I do about it? And I think that is what I want to encourage people to remember and think about. You have time to do something. You want to do something, do something. And then another point I want to raise is just it's important to remember, like the expert at anything was a beginner. The flippin' best obstetrician and gynecologist in the country once had to cut their first Caesar, maybe nick the bladder, who knows. But the point is, we all start somewhere. So don't be discouraged. It's a long journey. It is very tough. Invest in your own mental health. Invest in a good structure system. It is not easy to do this alone. It is not even easy to do it with support, but it can be worth it. And remember that, like, there's a lot of different things you can do with medicine. I know that you have an episode of all other careers in medicine. I'm not encouraging people to leave medicine. Yes. All I'm saying is that you are in a very fortunate position. You know the inside of the mechanism. You know the problems that's inside the system. Think about how you want to address that. And if you don't know, you can contact me and we can chat it out. We can look at plans, or we can talk about what are good platforms to work with. But, you owe it to yourself to try and change the things that you feel passionate about.
Yeah. Juandré, I think that's great. And if you will indulge me, I'll summarize back a little bit of what you've said there. And I think the first thing is that people overestimate what they can achieve in a day or a year, but they underestimate what they can achieve in 10 years. And sometimes it's that fear of not getting it right perfectly, or, the risks involved that stops people from even starting out. And as you mentioned, the very best obstetrician with the very best surgical hands and who's safely delivering dozens of babies every week now, at some point was an inexperienced intern cutting their first Caesar. And I'm pretty sure that most of us don't have complications in our first Caesars. We're training under supervision. But even if you do, that's not the end of the road. Failure in one block at medical school does not mean that you aren't going to go on to be a specialist one day. And just because you get allocated to community service in a CHC and not a tertiary hospital where you're going to get cutting time in your preferred surgical subspec doesn't mean that that's the end of your medical career. So thank you so much for that encouragement. I think it's just speaking to having a sense of optimism and a sense of purpose about what we do in medicine in South Africa. We have an incredible need in many areas, but we also have incredible opportunity. We have such incredible medical students and junior doctors, hopefully that are equipped and encouraged through this podcast and many other avenues as well. But, at the end of the day, to not, certainly not rest on any laurels, but also not to look at the mountain and say, okay, well, what can I do? It only takes a little bit of extra. That's the difference between something ordinary and extraordinary. It's just that little bit extra that makes the difference. So thank you very much for sharing your story. It's been really encouraging to me as well to hear how you weren't somebody who's naturally gifted in coding. You didn't do it at school. You weren't some computer whiz, with a great tech background.
No.
But you saw the need and you rose to the challenge. And I think that's what's important about having you as a guest, is you're somebody who, at very, very least, we can acknowledge rose to a challenge and taught yourself Python coding, taught yourself how to build an app, and even deciding to put it onto different platforms and put it onto desktop computers and cell phones. You're recognizing the realities of operating in our system. So well done, Juandré, Dr. Klopper. And I hope that through this podcast we've given some exposure to your apps. We've resourced our audience, and hopefully there's somebody listening who says, I want to back this. This is something that is only a kernel or a seed of what it can truly become.
Awesome. Thanks, Simon. Really appreciate it. And thanks for having me on the podcast again. And such a privilege meeting you. I mean, I've been hoping to meet you for quite a while. I love your content. So I'm really happy that I could sneak in a video call.
Tremendous, Juandré. Thank you so much for your time. You have a good evening, my friend. And I look forward to seeing you go from strength to strength. Like, I genuinely mean that.